Welcome to CVM Stories, the podcast on customer value management. Together we explore how companies can be more successful and the customers happier through the use of latest customer value management techniques. Learn key commercial and analytical insights from telecoms, retail, finance, and other industries that drive CVM forward. CVM Stories is produced by Exacaster. We help companies take their customer value management to the next level. To stay updated on our latest episodes, subscribe to the podcast or sign up for an email newsletter at exacaster.com/CVM Stories.
Are we ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Yeah, so Šarūnas, why are we doing this? Why are we actually filming the podcast? What would be your perspective here?
Yeah, so we are in an interesting position as Exacaster and as Šarūnas and Egidijus, because we work with roughly 30 telecom companies across the world. And in each of the cases, we are seeing something different about customer value management. And this really puts us in a special position, because as a customer value manager working inside a telecom, you can't really experience the whole diversity of what is out there in the world. And then we are sort of insider-outsider, with this external perspective, talking to many different people. We see a very unique point of view. And we wanted to share this point of view because we think it's very useful.
I totally feel you, It's like when we are talking with all those smart professionals around the world, you can see okay, I'm talking with somebody from United States, and they see how this person actually solved all the challenges that we have here in Europe or somewhere in Asia, and it's like, why do you guys don't talk,
Yeah, exactly.
The know-how travels through us, and it's like, wow, it's so interesting to have those conversations.
Yeah. I think it's a really well put example, because if you are able to put all of them in the same room, they would pretty quickly solve the challenges that each of them has. And I think everyone has their challenges, they're unique, but the solution is somewhere out there in the world. And I think that's the main aim of this podcast, to make it a bit easier to share this information.
To basically start collaborating more.
Yeah.
Well, Šarūnas, why do you think the customer value management specialists, they actually don't communicate like this easily?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, customer value management as an area is very strange. It is a lot about pricing, about margins. It is a lot about which segments do you have in your customer base, who do you focus on, what strategies do you apply. It is basically top secret. It's like the core commercial advantage of many telecom operators. So you're like running a spy agency, but you're only 2 or 3 of you in the company who really understand the big picture. And what that means is that you can't talk to the other spies, the other guys in the same market, because they're your competitors. And you can't talk to other industries because the challenges there are completely different. The only real way for these people to talk and grow professionally is either through some personal networks or through bigger groups, like, you have a larger telecom group operating in many markets, so they can share between themselves what works and what doesn't work. And that really accelerates the learning. But still, there is a specific bias of that group, how they look at the world, what strategies they pursue, and they still don't see the full picture that way. So that's one of the main reasons why this profession is very special and very different. At the same time, when you have such isolation of know-how, you end up in a situation where the learning is mainly through your own mistakes. So you start from not knowing much, and then as you try more and more things, you gradually build up the experience and start to understand what works and what doesn't work. And that's a pretty slow way to learn. Imagine if we had no universities.
Yeah.
Everyone had to rediscover the physics for themselves and then, build the first machinery and so on. We are very far because we stand on the shoulder of giants. It has been said many times. In this area, we are not very far because we have no other shoulders to stand on. We are actually starting from scratch in many cases.
When you put like this from this perspective, it seems like this area is super lonely. I actually haven't thought about that because, in any country you have 3, 4, 5, maybe up to 7, 10 maybe telcos, and that's it. And they are very close to the know-how. And you as a customer value manager, you actually feel very lonely here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is exactly what we hear when we talk to them in our day-to-day projects. We hear that I don't have whom to talk to, my manager does not understand me, the company does not appreciate what we do. Also what we hear is it's very hard to find replacements, it's very hard to attract new people into the profession because it doesn't even exist on any professional list of professions. Customer value management, it's very hard to place. Is this product management? Is this marketing? Is this sales? Is this all of the above? Is this data science? It's really a kind of in-between super important profession, but unfortunately it's very lonely, as you said.
And the funny part is like the loneliness is not only around kind of going to external companies, it's lonely inside because it's like a super cross-functional role, touches every point of organization, but also they are kind of the ones who are actually linking all organization and nobody kind of understands them very well.
You don't need 20 customer value management specialists in most cases. You need 1 or 2 who are the key decision makers, and then there might be different, bigger supporting teams, but the ones who are really in the thick of it is just a couple of people, So it's very lonely inside as well.
So what challenges do you see for the organizations, for example, with this situation?
Actually, there are quite a lot of impacts and challenges from this. So first of all is what happens when the professional leaves the company.
Okay, so
the company all of a sudden just lost 50% of its know-how or even 100% of the know-how. And we see this in real life where a company is extremely proficient 1 year, and then the next year they are trying to rebuild everything from scratch because they have forgotten everything. And they are issuing RFPs for solving different challenges. And we see that these RFPs 1 year are extremely well written, and then the next year they're extremely beginner level. So there's this huge fluctuation in know-how. And as the appreciation of this discipline is not very deep in the top management circles, the company doesn't even understand that it lost this capability. So they kind of think they can execute as before, but really they can't. It's like you just fired the entire call center or the entire IT department and everyone is new. So it's that level of a challenge, and then this creates mistakes and further challenges and so on and so forth. On top of that, you add the loneliness, and now you really have learning by trial and error. It's a very slow process. So overall, the discipline moves quite slowly ahead.
I think from our perspective, we are actually on the other side. So we can kind of at this situation, we can observe how telcos are actually dealing with those situations. Have you seen any examples or kind of how we as external vendor see that situation, kind of what happens there?
Yeah, it actually requires us to adapt to the different levels of maturity of the organization you're working with. With a mature organization, it's easy to run fast. You can understand what everyone is doing. There is a specific piece of the puzzle that they need solved. We can join in, solve that piece of the puzzle. Everyone is happy, it's done. If you're working with an organization that has just lost its understanding of this area, or maybe is just growing it from scratch, you are dealing with a much less mature organization. And in that case, we can't explain everything to them because it will take months. And for them to understand everything, it will take years. So they're just overloaded with information. The only strategy which we found works is actually doing small, agile projects, accepting the imperfect outcomes because the client is still imposing his understanding. But we know it's not correct, but what can you do? So you basically leave it for the client to learn from his mistakes, but you try to minimize them and kind of put a pillow where they might land so that they can get up and then go to the next step. So you facilitate this organizational learning with the less mature organizations. And that is completely, let's say, unexpected impact of this, that even helping organizations is actually very different and difficult.
Yeah, so I also see from, let's say, from the RFP, from the maturity of RFP, from the problems that actually are coming from telcos, you can make a pretty good judgment. It's like how well are the team structured, are the functions covered well, are the team members in place necessary, etc. And in many situations, we see that this changes over the time, yeah, and we see we can identify when like a new team is assembled, etc. In this case, have you seen good and bad examples? For example, how to start filling the gaps or how to start improving for the companies?
Yes, I'm just trying to think of most, like illustrative examples. But I think one very bad example is through thinking that the technology is wrong and doing a technical project. Usually, the organization did not lose its systems.
Yeah.
The systems are still there. Actually, the organization lost its people, and you can't start rebuilding know-how by replacing the systems. The systems encode the know-how. So you have to start from rebuilding the team, which understands what are their imperfections and so on. Yes, technological progress is necessary, but you start from the people, and then you do the upgrade of the processes, and then you kind of end up with a technology transformation. So starting from technology is a bad idea if you lost people.
Yeah. I think during some last examples, we saw how, let's say, customer value management team, they are maturing and going, let's say, from manual processes to more AI-driven processes, and then they went through all this learning process. Like when the RFP, we took kind of, I don't know, 5, 6, maybe even 7 different kind of rounds of adopting to organization needs and helping them actually to kind of evolve their maturity of understanding. What benefits do you see in those type of processes when you see that kind of you need to help the companies to mature towards what they actually want?
Yeah, I think customer value management has, maybe there is some, disclaimers and asterisks we can put here because it really depends on the size of the customer base you're working with. But quite often you can live with manual processes at the beginning. So when the organization is starting to do something, it's actually a very good idea to run things manually because then you understand what are the data sources, what are the approaches, the offers, anything else that we have. Test them, and then you see, okay, well, this is really boring work. Now we should automate this. And we know this process works, we trust in it, and then we can roll it out on a technological level. So I see these good teams, good examples, they basically kind of follow this path, and it works. It's an agile way through quick iterations, aiming for the business result and not for the perfect platform for everything to run on, and then kind of forgetting to actually launch the core process. This applies in the case of smaller customer bases, and by small, I probably mean something like up to 5 million in terms of subscribers. I think this can be managed. The Excel kind of works up to some point, so you can load all of the data, you can process this amount of data in data warehouses or elsewhere, prepare the data. It mostly works. The moment you go bigger, then the technical challenges really start to bite. And it's no longer doable by a couple of people manually. You need large teams, and they do different pieces of the whole, and then things become really challenging.
Okay.
So for the bigger operators, learning is really difficult, but there I have seen companies starting to work with either small segments or small products and build up the know-how this way. So it's anyway, even in the largest customer base, possible to find a product with just a couple of million customers using it, and then start to work with that product.
So we started the kind of conversation of why we are launching this podcast. So maybe it's a good time to actually wrap up this part. So the key thing here is basically to start talking about these topics more. What other objectives would you place here for this podcast?
I think the main objective is to put this area on the map for more people and educate the market that it is a very important area. It's also quite different from other areas. It requires special approaches from the top management perspective. How do you build it? For the people who are coming into the profession, it also requires special approaches. So kind of generally moving the discipline forward and helping people who might want to consider this as a career understand how this works. Because we need new people all the time in all of the telecom companies everywhere. This is such an important part of their commercial success. So I think that's one of the main goals of this podcast.
Yeah. If I can add, it's also kind of our geeky part to actually talk about this, because you're every day in this, you're solving the problems, communicating with people, but just kind of building the platform to talk about, share know-how, and it's kind of, I think it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so maybe a few words about the format and the idea. So as you see, it is an industry where there is a little of codified knowledge. All of the knowledge is in the heads of the practitioners. So what we have decided is to invite different experts to share their stories. And it's going to be a storytelling format. And today we will also share a few of our own stories, how we ended up in this area. But overall, we would encourage the viewers to use this platform to ask questions as well in the comments or contact us. And we will try to answer those questions and help you troubleshoot. Maybe you have a specific issue that you would like to solve. We will put that challenge to the next guest, and then you can use that knowledge.
Yeah, or if you have, let's say, candidates for the guests that you would really want to get a bit more know-how or ask some specific questions for them, we're happy to invite them and actually to have a nice conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, Šarūnas, so we are talking about this customer value management area. You are in telco, I don't know how many years?
20 years.
20 years. Yeah, so how did you start? What are your roots here,
Yeah, so my start is actually from like 20 years is a long time. So if you go back 20 years, it's almost when the internet is just becoming important. And so my roots come from the digital experience and digitization projects. At that time, I was a project manager, and we were implementing a big online community. And we had a very good arrangement commercially as an outside vendor, developing software and managing the community. And the client was kind of guiding us on a business objective level and leaving the rest of the details to us. So we were really like almost running the product for them as well. And at that point in time, you have this interesting situation where you can implement anything, but you don't know what is important. And if you ask the client, they won't tell you anything. So it's your job, go and figure it out. So that was a moment where I really started to think, okay, well, we could do something, but maybe let's do something that is valuable to the users of this online community. And the overall concept was very similar to what Reddit is today. And we were, for a number of years, the leading community in a local market. So we had this very interesting starting point, very good arrangement, and now show me your potential. So at that point, I basically thought long and hard which features should we really develop. And somehow I stumbled on the idea of not doing interviews, not doing surveys and so on, but really looking at the web server logs. So like from the server perspective, I know that every single page view is being logged.
Yeah.
And we could potentially analyze it.
How did the web logs look at that point of time?
They looked very ugly, but they look pretty much the same as all the logs look today. So they have a date stamp, timestamp, and then they have a user ID, which is the cookie. So actually the user is persistent, and then they have the page title and the URL. So you have to work a bit to extract useful information from the logs, but you can start doing some pretty interesting analysis on this. And some of these pages are like commercial payment landing pages, others are like feature pages, and so on and so forth. So of course, I look at the logs and yeah, like the number one page is the home page. Okay, nothing interesting there, let's dig in deeper. And the really powerful insights started to come when I began using cookies as the main parameter of analysis. So not looking at popularity in general, but looking at which people use which features most, sort of rudimentary segmentation by feature and user group. And I very quickly found that there is a page in the portal which is unexplainably popular. Okay. This page was about me. It's like a page where you can write a few words about yourself as a user of the platform, like every forum has this page. But in this page, we had a technical bug, which turned out to be a feature. The length of the field was unlimited. It was a blob, technically speaking. So you could write there hundreds of pages of about you. And I saw that the most frequent visitors to this page, I opened those profiles and I saw what they were doing. They were not writing their name or last name, they were actually publishing a diary. So they were putting a date and they wrote what happened to them on that day. Next date and then the next day. And there was a huge group of people who were reading those diaries. So all of a sudden I'm like guided by the user what feature we should build next, because this was after a few top basic pages like the homepage and the login and so on, the diary was next. So we invested into that feature, we developed it, we launched it, and it was huge success instantly. And like, now we know what to do. And the rest of the project is kind of known in history. We became extremely famous, extremely popular, but that was the moment where we really took what today is called data-driven decisions and applied them immediately, and the results were fantastic. So kind of, I would say this is for me the basics or the starting point of customer value management, because mechanically it is the same. Even though we were applying this for developing features rather than maybe adjusting pricing, we use this everywhere. Content, pricing, all of the decisions start to be made in the same way. And I think this today is still true, runs across many fields. You could even say it's basic scientific principle of collecting data and making decisions based on that. But when you start to apply in business, it really can be extremely powerful. So that was my kind of point where I became interested in this approach and thought, well, this is a methodology that really works.
So we are talking like, 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
Big data was not existing, kind of analytical terms were not existing, tools were very immature.
I was using Notepad to count cookies, basically that,
exactly. Yeah. So how did you where did you get the inspiration, to start working from this direction, you know?
Yeah, I think it was a lucky coincidence of several factors. In the university, I had market research and social research as a subject. So I knew the basics of, okay, let's collect some data, let's make a hypothesis, let's apply some tests to see is this hypothesis valid or not. So kind of the basic scientific principle was clear to me. But you're working with a very different data set. You're working with something that is clean, it's collected, and very limited in a sense. It's not growing every single day and so on. So I kind of had the starting point. Then my very first job was actually as a market research field assistant. So I was the guy doing interviews, basically. The guys you meet in the airport, and you say no to them most of the time. So that was me. I was very young. And I was just asking questions that I was supposed to ask. And during this exercise, I actually noticed that the answers are interesting. They are surprising. And I had to do very basic summaries at the end of the day because there were no data processing tools. It was just basically people doing the counting of the paperwork and, you know, providing a summary at the end of the day to the supervisor who would compile into a bigger report. So I was privy to some of the findings, you know, and I would say, oh, this is an interesting finding. And it kind of, this was, I think, the seed. And then when I'm looking at the logs, you know, yeah, this looks kind of similar in principle. And then, yeah, the rest kind of grew naturally from there.
Okay. So your first touch was like through product development, community development in the very early stages. Then how did your career evolve further?
Yeah, so once I touched that space, I was really hooked, and I wanted to do more digital products, bigger customer bases, bigger impact, and so on. So I was on the path of becoming a proper customer value manager, addicted to providing results for the company. And I was fortunate to find a job in a telecommunications company, which was among many. I mean, yeah, it could have been anywhere, but it happened to be telecommunications. And there was also a very fortunate confluence of circumstances that this particular company applied what you could say Procter & Gamble model of product ownership. So the product owner is, they say, the mini CEO. So he's responsible for the P&L, for the pricing, for the marketing, for the production of it.
Okay.
It's like a huge responsibility, but the product may be very small in the telecom company, but still you have everything under your umbrella. So I was really working, like able to pull all the strings, and the products that we were introducing in telecommunications at the time, they are still fundamental today. Things like mobile broadband, things like Internet of Things, and so on and so forth. So really pretty fundamental products were already way back in the day, 15 years ago, were already being introduced, experimented with, and managed, and so on. So that was when I kind of came already formed into an industry that has a pretty big demand for this competence.
Okay. Yeah. So again, these are kind of we are talking, I don't know, 17 maybe years ago, 18.
Yeah.
So at that point of time, again, this kind of everything was new. So how did you deal with that novelty? What was your inspiration there? What were kind of, I don't know, where did you learn?
Yeah, so like one of the first things that I asked, show me the logs. And you know, the answer came, well, we have many logs. Which ones do you need? Yeah. And I said, like, well, all of them, you know, like the rawest data that there is. And then I get like these binary CDRs that are impossible to interpret because there's ones and zeros straight from the network. So I understood, okay, well, the telecom data landscape is slightly more complicated, but it was already digital. So they are, of course, in pretty much the same position as a web server, you know. Yeah. Everything that goes through the network, they're registering as a log, and then it is available for legitimate purposes of the business. Customer revenue management, fraud management, billing, customer service, and so on. It's widely used inside the company as a very fundamental source about how the company operates. And at this point, I really understood that in a community environment like this web portal, you can actually look at the product. You can try it out yourself. So pretty much it's very transparent. In the telecommunication space, it's not transparent at all. You don't see the product. Okay. It's like you can use it, but that's my specific experience. I'm making a call. And if this call is happening, in a bad coverage situation, or if it's happening abroad, the experience might be completely different. So all of a sudden, I'm exposed to this, okay, well, actually, it's very diverse ways of using this product. And when we started doing the analysis of the logs, at some point, I was granted access after many requests, denials, and explanations, and so on. Then we saw that, okay, actually, these logs have really interesting information, and we can begin using that. So this started my journey on telecom customer value management.
Oh, wow. It's like
like breaking the ice.
It's like today we are talking like kind of querying the terabytes of data. It's like I don't know, a piece of cake, at that point, you get an Excel
or file,
and it's like this is everything what you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what learnings do you bring from this period of your career? Like you were owning kind of products and customer value management for those products entirely on your own.
Yeah.
So what were your, let's say, biggest lessons there?
So I will look at this from the customer value management angle and data management angle. And I can say that pretty much we either did the analysis wrong and failed, or we did the analysis right and it was a breakthrough success. So always I was seeing this, okay, if we really do the analysis properly and make the right conclusions, it's a no-brainer. Okay. It works. It's a very, very robust methodology. And you can keep on applying this again and again and again and again. And so by now I'm like extremely confident in this whole approach and the methodology, but there is this big disclaimer if you do the analysis right. And for many years, I was I had basics of analytics, and it took me a really long time to start to obtain a good intuitive feel for the data. And I was always asking the analysts to do the analysis, and they're interpreting the data for me. I would not understand what they're saying to me. It took me several years to understand that the average is a very bad measurement. And I learned it the hard way in some specific cases where the average was extremely misleading. It was not intuitive,
Can you give any of examples?
So I think this is actually one of my biggest success stories from this time, which I can share with you. And we had a very strange situation in the business. So when you're trying to model revenue, and as a product owner, you are supposed to know how much money you're generating and how much you will generate in the future. So you're modeling the revenue. You basically need two variables. Average revenue per user and the number of users. And any changes that are happening over a month, the next month you're getting different average, different number of users, and you just build the budget like that. So this is where I learned the hard way that average is a really bad thing. So we always missed the budget by either plus 5% or minus 5%. And the average was fluctuating slightly, like several points something after the whole number. But it was sufficiently large to cause big deviations, and I was always in the hot seat with the CFO asking, why are you missing the budget? Like, how hard can it be? It's just basics. And something was messing up the average in my customer base, and nobody could find it. So after like the last meeting, and he said, solve it or it's done, you're out. I said, okay, well, now I really have to, get ready, dig into the data myself and try to find the answer because nobody can find the answer. And I asked for a complete dump of the customer base with months as columns and the revenue. The rows are the customers, and then there is the revenue in every single column for every single customer, every single month going back 2 years.
Okay.
Imagine it's a pretty big Excel, and they took some weeks to prepare, and then I'm getting this back, maybe several 100,000 customers in this. And I'm looking at this, and how the hell do I now analyze this? Okay, well, I'm kind of stumped. Okay, you can try some basic pivot tables and so on, but you can't really do this. And one person said, well, why don't you try something like cohort analysis? And like, okay, what is cohort analysis? And then I read about it, I understood, yes, okay, this is very clear. I applied the principle, and pretty quickly I started seeing specific groups of customers who are 1 month generating a huge invoice, and then the next month generating a huge minus invoice. And I'm talking plus 10,000 euros, dollars, minus 10,000 euros, dollars per single customer. Clearly not normal. So I'm thinking, okay, well, this is a mistake in the billing system. I went to the billing guys and said, no, this is normal. This guy went abroad, he was roaming, and he just ran a big invoice. And then I'm like, oh my God, these guys are actually experiencing bill shock. Then they're calling the call center. The call center is apologizing and giving them minus 10,000 credit because they're saying like, I didn't do anything. I will not pay this amount. And like, okay, well, we found the problem. So we went, we fixed this, but the overall learning just really confirmed the whole idea that you have to look at the data. The data has all the answers there. And this opened the eyes that, okay, well, at the lowest level, the answer is always there if you know how to approach it.
So how did you fix it?
We just added a credit limit. It didn't exist at the time, you know. So you just say, okay, if you overrun more than 200, we stop, we send you a notification and ask you to call if you want to increase the limit. Very basic customer value management things, you know.
A super simple trick that actually saved your career.
Yeah, saved everything, you know, and the customers are happy. We're not having administrative nightmare with this process, and everything is just beautiful. So that's kind of, I think I would say, one of my proud moments. Yeah. But yeah, I chose this as the proudest moment for this session.
Yeah, sounds really super cool, you know.
Yeah.
And maybe kind of going back to there, kind of what books have you read at that point of time? How did you actually evolve your learning? Because I assume it wasn't kind of that you invented everything, you know. It's
No, yeah. So actually, at around this time, I'm now like a super keen reader of analytical books. So I'm searching for methodologies and so on, and there is a lot of good books about analytics, but not many of them illustrate the application of analytics in business context at the time. Now you can find thousands of books like this. But at that point in time, for me, I found a book called Scoring Points, which was about how Tesco built their loyalty program in the UK using analytics as the main engine for everything, for recommending offers, setting the prices, segmenting the customer base. Everything was data-driven rather than, let's say, intuitive or, you know, based on the latest fashion last week. And this book really opened my eyes that to implement analytics in business, it's not a single person in a corner department of the department can do it. It's a company-wide transformation. It has to be led by the top management, by the CEOs and so on, if you want to achieve the full potential of this. If you are okay with incremental small gains, yes, fine, you can do some magic. But in Tesco's case, they were investing like millions. Everything was changing. The compensation system for the salespeople were changing. A loyalty card was introduced for the first time into the business. They were pioneers of loyalty cards. So I read this book and I thought, wow, well, this is how you do it. I want to do this too, you know. So that was for me when I really understood that actually I want to do this. Yeah.
Okay, so what happened next?
So yeah, I think, well, Exacaster is one of the outcomes. Yeah, we started this together with Egidijus, right?
Yeah.
And so now it's your turn. Why are you here?
Why I am here?
Yeah.
Mine is also kind of pretty funny story. By design, I am kind of an analyst. I am super geek in data, numbers, etc. So I was actually studying statistics. And statistics as a kind of statistics as a discipline, it's not very interesting. But I was that one out of 1,000 or so guys who were so lucky because I had a super professor who was in his late 60s, etc. And he was all into the latest stuff, what is happening in AI and machine learning. And it was like, I don't know, 20 years ago. And at that point of time, in kind of faculty of mathematics, neural networks and artificial intelligence were treated like a joke, you know? They said it's like
the AI winter is still on.
Yeah, the AI winter is still on, and everybody's saying like, you know, AI is not mathematics. So what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So this professor, Pranas, he was pretty lonely, you know, and he was reading latest AI papers, etc. And I happened to be the guy who was interested in it. So he started actually feeding me with the latest what is happening in machine learning, AI, and I was kind of slowly educating myself towards this direction. And at the same time, I was kind of a pretty energetic guy who wanted to do something, you know, it's like, let's run a business or something like that, I don't know.
Sort of a bit of an entrepreneurial vibe.
Yeah, it was like, I want to do something. And and at some point, I remember I was like 19 years old, and one of the local telcos, they launched like a new product idea for telecoms contest, and the winner will get lunch with CEO. So, I'm thinking like, I need to go there. So I actually submitted the idea, which was like SMS chat or SMS group, very similar thing that now we have like Messenger or WhatsApp, etc., where you could actually send a single message and the whole group would get that.
Still a good idea.
Yeah, and I actually won the contest. I went to the CEO, we had a nice lunch, and he said, do you want to get an internship? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I want. So, and this is actually how I came into Šarūna's department.
Yeah, so now you end up in telecom. So what happens?
Now I end up in telecom. And it's like, and at that point of time, I remember that this telco company was actually, it was, again, 17 years ago or something like that. Mobile internet is just getting started, so we are talking about like 2G technology and moving towards 3G technology. Mobile penetration is very low. It is low because there are not a lot of mobile products to browse, etc. So we launched a first kind of startup ecosystem to build new products in mobile industry. So I got this challenge. I'm like 19 years old. We need to run a contest and build, I don't know, maybe 30, 40 new products. So let's do this. I'm kind of communicating with all going to the universities, pitching, gathering kind of teams that would actually build the products. And we launched like 40 new products in 4 or 5 months. And
I think that's still amazing by today's standards if you think about it.
Yeah, it was like totally crazy. I couldn't believe that kind of we could achieve this type of success. And kind of the project was treated as a pretty good in the company. And I got kind of a permanent contract. So now I'm kind of, I'm studying statistics, getting my know-how in machine learning, AI, etc. And also managing mobile products here. So it's like mobile data products were kind of one of my primary responsibilities there. So I worked with both prepaid and postpaid and kind of improving penetration there, generating revenue, etc. So this is how I ended up in the telco itself. And there I was super passionate and fascinated about the amount of data that we have there. So similar to your story, Šarūnas, it's like in the beginning as a kind of product manager, I used to get the reports from data analysts. And at some point of time, I started saying, guys, hey, don't prepare me presentations. Just give me the queries,
Give me the data.
Yeah, give me the data.
Yeah.
I will run the analysis myself. So, and I started actually playing with the numbers, trying to understand the customers better, etc. And this was super fascinating to me. But at the same point, I was learning machine learning, and the AI, and I got kind of really consumed by all the AI topic. It's like it became even more fascinating for me compared to the business part. And in business, I couldn't actually, or I didn't know how to apply all my knowledge to the max there. So I started moving more towards AI topics, etc. And at some point of time, I left the company. I think it was, I don't know, after 3 or 4 years, something like that. But I still had my professor, We were still studying AI, we were building models, we were trying to, we were actually predicting the markets, perform, or kind of
stock markets,
yeah. etc. We had many good things and bad things happening there, but after 2 years or so of trying to conquer the stock market, I understood that maybe it's not so interesting, but at the same time I have the best algorithms in town, and I could implement like the algorithms that were just published in the scientific papers, like several weeks, let's say, news. And then I called Šarūnas and said, Šarūnas, I remember you're a super energetic guy, you have many ideas. I have a problem. I have many good algorithms.
And you know what I said? I have many problems. Let's do this together.
Yeah, let's do this together. Yeah. And so we started from predicting churn those 14 years ago.
Yeah. So really, I mean, even to this day, this is a topic that comes back again and again and again.
Exactly.
But maybe we will touch on that a bit later. But going back to the telecom period, what was your biggest success there? What do you remember from that time?
I remember that I was learning a lot, so I was super young there. But one part I remember really well. So the mobile business was the data business was growing. It was super good, and we were kind of ahead of the competition because the team was big and we were actually pushing mobile data a lot. And then our competitors kind of started focusing on the mobile data as well, and they were squeezing us a bit into the corner because we had kind of decent prices, but the competition were kind of dropping the price significantly. And we needed to figure out a solution how to continue to grow in this area without losing customers and without losing our margins. And they had to find a way. And at that point of time, our kind of pricing strategy was like we had daily, weekly, and monthly bundles. And daily bundles were like, I don't know, something like 40 megabytes per day or something like that. They were extremely small and extremely expensive. So kind of if we would just reduce the price, we would lose a lot of
basically the budget
revenue.
Doesn't allow it.
Yeah, the budget didn't allow us to act on this. So I had to be a bit more creative. So what I did exactly the same thing as you did. I took all the base. I took all the statistics that I could get about the customers, like so how many customers do we have, what are the sessions durations, how much data do they use, etc., etc., etc.
So really like deep dive into the data, try to understand how they behave.
I just try to understand what is happening and where are the ideas for me to kind of push this product further. And I found some really super fascinating things. I saw that a lot of people who are actually purchasing those daily packages, they were using the data kind of just for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, etc. And at the same time, we were getting kind of feedback from our customer base, from the surveys, that the entry fee for the daily packages were really big. So so I started to wonder, okay, if some people actually purchase a big package but use it for just a couple of minutes, because at that time we remember the phones were small, it was 2G, the internet was slow, and you couldn't do a lot of stuff there. So I started wondering what are the other perspectives for the pricing. And then kind of after analyzing the customer base, I identified a segment of customers who actually used the product for a brief periods of time. And I understood that, okay, maybe we have to offer a different pricing strategy for those customers. And let's build a pricing strategy which could not be beaten by the competition. So then what we did, we actually kind of introduced pricing per minute. And we took the price like 1 cent per minute. You couldn't go cheaper than 1 cent, you know. And we actually launched to the market. It became a huge hit pretty fast. I left the company.
What happened to the revenue, by the way? Did it drop, or did you grow the combined overall?
The combined grew significantly, and I have left the company, I know, several months after launch. When I met the people who continue to evolve this product, they were still saying that after a year, the revenue was still growing. It was like, okay, good job.
There you go. So that's your hit.
So that was my hit. And then at that point, I really understood that you can do a lot with the data insights.
Maybe, I don't know, it could be a bit too deep for this conversation, but you are an analyst by design, by profession. You are deep in this area. Describe your process for analyzing data. How do you approach this? So you're staring at this Excel, lots of columns, you have some vague business problem. What's the next step that you do?
Actually, I always start from looking at the rawest possible data. This is not intuitive, because usually you start, as you said, from averages. But the averages don't tell a lot, because these are kind of just a sum of information. I really like just taking the raw columns and the raw records and just staring at them, scrolling, just figuring out what are the different kind of behaviors for the customers. Because you may look at the ARPU number, which is, I don't know, $20 or 20 euros. But when you actually stare at the real people, you will see there are some with zeros. And you see they use a lot of data or make a lot of calls, but they are zeros. What does this mean?
They're getting something for free somehow.
So then I started understanding, okay, in my customer base, there is some fraud. There are some test cards.
Yes, that's another reason why there are zeros.
There are some, I don't know, kind of employee cards, etc. So you start getting the ideas that, okay, maybe my data is not so clean, or maybe my customers are really various. Because and then when you scroll through and you find customers who spend 1,000 euros, so they are doing something
super rich,
super strange, Or you see, okay, some customers somehow have managed to use 200 different devices per month, or 300.
how is this physically possible?
How can you do this?
Yeah.
You know, and then when you kind of double check, it seems this is kind of a store where they actually fix devices and test them.
Okay, that's how you do it.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't get into the details, you are not creative enough with the data. You cannot get creative with the data.
Okay, so the first step in your method is basically go as deep as possible and form an intuition about how the real world looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And
that's completely not intuitive.
And then from there, I actually go and kind of, do the
Try
adjustments.
to summarize the different groups that you have seen.
Yeah, exactly. It gives me a perspective like what numbers to eliminate, etc., so that I would get a much better intuition. So that would be kind of my key process, which might be similar or different from other people. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So when we think about the successes, there is always some challenges or some failures.
Yeah.
Maybe something comes to mind. I didn't share my failure yet, but we can discuss this as well.
Okay. I would say it was my failure and the team's failure at the same time, because we as a team were launching a new product to the market. It had a super tight deadline because this product was linked with some governmental adjustments that you could not give deliver papers in the paper form, but you had to sign it with a signature, with an electronic signature. And the deadlines were in a way that it were designed for failure, because the person who was actually leading the project, he had planned a long vacation, I know, many years before. Everything was booked, etc., and he had to leave. I was in the same team helping to build this product, so I had to take over the launch of the product. And the product was very, very complex,
technically
complex. And the deadline was external.
Okay,
Yeah, so I really remember this situation when I was kind of hanging on the phone, writing the email with one hand, and a person standing here shouting at me. It's like everybody are shouting, and we're like, oh my God, we're crashing and burning.
Because nothing worked.
Nothing works. How can I kind of get this product, etc. And so that was kind of a really big challenge. It was one of the toughest periods in my career. I would say those several weeks. But I also learned a lot. I wouldn't kind of eliminate this from my experience. From there, I am much better prepared for every other situation.
So now you understand what a failed launch is. You know where not to go.
Exactly. Kind of. This builds your character and experience. And what about you, Šarūnas? What was your kind of...
So in customer value management, you can have situations like what you described, because the base is so big, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard to estimate the impact of what you're doing. Launching a product, everything crashes because of overload or not something not working. Really, really upsetting. In my case, it was more the classical customer value management rite of passage. It is a bad campaign.
Okay.
And when you launch a campaign and something is wrong in it, you can't undo it normally, because you just send it to 500,000 customers or 1 million customers. It's done, and you look like a fool to the entire country. It's another very, very painful experience, and you see this happening again and again as a new person comes into the role. He doesn't understand the impact first. He doesn't do sufficient testing. Press launch, and then you're very, very sorry. So it happened to me, but in this case, it was an email campaign.
Okay.
And the main link was bad. Like, click to buy is just doesn't go anywhere. So like, what do you do? And it was very fortunate that in my case, we launched a huge campaign. The main link is very bad, and I already can start feeling, the pressure and everything. Like, why did you do this? But when I looked at the link, I saw that actually the beginning is correct and just the ending is wrong.
Okay.
So then I very quickly went to the main developer, that I had access to and said, can you please make the end of this link lead to the correct landing page? And that's how we fixed it. So it was almost huge problem. But yeah. So I think this is something that happens pretty much to every single person in customer value management area.
Yeah, I think with every kind of, we have seen this mistake
repeated, I don't know, hundreds of times.
Yeah, really, hundreds of times. Yeah. It's like both customer value managers and the teams, they just need to experience this.
Yeah, yeah. So about books, what book would you recommend? What was your inspiration in this area?
I have actually two recommendations. So one will be about artificial intelligence and kind of a broader perspective on how this actually impacts us around. So I would really recommend Architects of Intelligence. So there are like, I know 19 or 20 different industry experts and their perspectives on how AI is shaping everything. So this is like a really interesting read, just to give a broader perspective.
Very nice.
On how this shapes.
And the second one?
And the second is like current, like my favorite for the last 1 year book, I would say, The Gap and the Gain.
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful book. Yeah.
I continue recommending.
It doesn't apply only to analytics. It's a general life-changing book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Šarūnas, yours?
Yeah, so I mentioned my first recommendation, Tesco Scoring Points. And the second recommendation is a very academic book. It's called Pricing and Revenue Optimization by Robert Phillips. Very old, published in 2005.
Oh, wow.
By Stanford University, but it gives you a comprehensive historical overview of pricing and revenue management, and customer value management is kind of like the child of this industry with a lot more personalization and so on. But still fundamentally, all of the techniques that we apply are described there, including how they emerged. So really good if you're just starting out in the field to understand the variety of things that can be done. It's a very difficult but strong read. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you for the conversation today. I hope it was interesting. And
thank you, Šarūnas. And we'll meet you guys with other interesting people
soon. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to CVM Stories. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review. You can also ask us a question about a particular customer value management challenge you have at work. We will happily ask our experts to tackle your challenge in a future episode.